Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Yeah, here I am, as advertised. It's January 20, 2022. Suddenly there seem to be too many twos in there. I am so looking forward to today's program, mostly because I am not going to have to do most of the talking. And I'm sorry, I was trying to read something. I can't multitask. I'm sorry. I have been saying that if misery loves company, then this is the place to be, because I'm sure many of you have just been, miserable, if not frightened, over the last few years, watching our country's trajectory. Joining us today is somebody who I don't know. I'm hoping he might give a little more dispassionate point of view to what's happening, just by virtue of the fact that he is an historian. Jared Day taught American history, which we're living at Carnegie Mellon for many years, and appeared with some regularity on my show in days past. He now still teaches, but he's decamped to Connecticut. And some of you miss his aggregation of news stories, which was called Daily News Nuggets. So, Jared, are you there?
I'm here, Lynn.
Here you are. Good to hear your voice.
Is it coming through okay?
Yes. I think so. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're fine.
That's great. Okay, good. Jared, I just, we haven't spoken in years, and let's start with sort of an overview. And again, you're carrying so much more knowledge of American history than most of us, if not all of us. And I just want to say that I'm an old lady now. I remember living in the 60s as a young woman and feeling fearful that the country seemed to be coming apart. And that was a very consequential historic moment. And it's still reverberating, obviously. But I have a mother who is almost 100, and she agrees with me that in her lifetime, which saw a Great Depression, World War II, and everything that I have dealt with as well, she thinks these times are so far and beyond more terrifying than any she has lived through. And here's what I want to say. I think this is right now the most consequential time in American history, save for the Civil War, I guess. And I also want to say this, that I am so happy that most of the greatest generation, my father included, is no longer with us, because that is the generation that fought autocracy and fascism. And to see something looking very much like that building in this country, I am so glad that my dad doesn't have to see it. It would break his heart.
Well, I think you draw a very important connection there. When we look at why it is that some things are kind of going the way that they're going right now, and I say this both about the United States and about the world, and that is that we are now to a point in world history where most people who remember fascism are not on the stage anymore. And so what you have is generation, and I might even say more, perhaps even more than one generation of people growing up who don't know what it is, couldn't recognize it if they saw it, and I also say, like, don't have any sort of enough historical training to actually see it for what it is. So that now that it's coming along again, that people don't get it for that.
So, I mean, that brings us to those who do not know history are, condemned to repeat it.
Yes. And this is, and we're kind of also in a time where there's almost like history wars going on. About what it is what is American history, or what is world history? What are the lessons that history can actually teach us? I am often astonished by what passes for informed history, and of course we see this in a lot of the culture war areas, like the role of memories of the Confederacy, and all of that. That it is, and also what did I see the other day? I forget what state it was. That it was either doing that on Martin Luther King Day, that they were actually the state legislature passed something where it also made it Confederate Commemorative Day.
Oh, dear God in heaven. Yeah. Well,
and it's almost like there's a zero-sum game going on here in the minds of some. That any sort of acknowledgement of others, and here again, it's like kind of talking about maybe African Americans as they're really not Americans. Well, if you're going to acknowledge them, then you have to do something for real Americans in addition to that.
Oh, dear. I can tell you're not going to cheer me up.
Well, I think I'm in a somewhat dark. I think that it's a mistake to sugarcoat what's going on. I actually think that one of the problems we have right now, that I think that the media doesn't want to call it for what it is.
Thank you. You do agree with me. I think the media is a big, huge part of the problem, and is complicit by virtue of its what? I don't know. It's impotence, or it's a lack of courage
lack of courage.
I'm just blown away. But is that because it's a corporate media? No, probably not. It's just human beings never.
Well, I think that is true for Fox News. That their greatest fear is losing audience. And so that anything that threatens that, and they'll say anything. I'm perhaps exaggerating. But there are worse entities out there than Fox News. But just in the main, that they allow a degree of misrepresentation that is breathtaking for an organization that calls itself a news organization.
Yeah. Let me jump into something right now. I mean, at the heart of this, well, I don't know. There's so many. When historians years hence write about this time, there will be a lot of people, issues, institutions, that will be seen as pivotal, I'm sure. But it seems to me that the Republican Party is obviously one, and you, as a historian of America, know that political parties in this country don't necessarily last forever, and they do morph, and What are we? The Republican Party, it seems to me, has ceased to be a partner in this experiment of American democracy. It won't play. It won't. It wants power.
Yes. And then again, the issue of the zero-sum game comes in, where that if you I think the calculation, and this is simply just an observation compared to where we've been before, is that Republican Party people, and I'd say a lot of Republican voters, have basically concluded that they can't maintain their influence given the way voting is done in this country historically. And so they
can't win. You're saying they can't win a free and fair election?
In the aggregate, like in the big picture. But the big picture, Jared, by virtue of how our founding fathers, set things up, gives them a head start. Democrats are handicapped by virtue of the way the legislative branch is made up, the way the electoral college exists. That has always been the case. But I think what you're seeing now is, I think what most people don't realize is that American democracy used to stink pretty bad. Okay, like back in the 19th century, that if you look at the role of political machines, the role of money, the role of the fact that you didn't have direct election of senators, the degree to which voting was left to the states, and all of that went with that. Okay, that democracy, was great in the 19th century compared to what was going on in Europe and other parts of the world. But over the course of most of the 20th century, the United States has worked consistently to reform that election system, such that it is much more democratic. The institution of primaries and the nonpartisan election structures and institutions and officials and all of that machinery of democracy, that back in the 19th century, it was rotten as hell. What you see, what at least my sense of what's going on now is, it's like a lot of that reform that's been done in the last 80 to 100 years is the Republicans are working to undo that.
Obviously.
To kind of dial things back to an earlier time.
To an earlier time that you just told us, where democracy was pretty abysmal in this country. Yeah. They want to go back to that corrupted form without, and this is a Republican mantra, without the regulation that has been put in place in the last, in the last 50, 60, 70 years.
Checks and balances that allow people to view this thing as having integrity.
I read something this morning that just made my, the thing is, after Trump, Trump got us so used to every hour hearing something that was outrageous, unbelievable, upsetting, so that we got to the point where we never stayed with any outrage for longer than, a day or two, and you move on to the next. And we have become, over the years, right, just inured to that, so that I think the thing is it almost shut down. And the Republicans are, having a field day because so much of America has shut down out of exhaustion and fear and all that. And then I see the little drip that I saw this morning, that in arguments before the Supreme Court about Ted Cruz getting, accepting money after an election. There's some rule that after an election, somebody cannot. This is so arcane, I can't deal with it. But it's sad that the Supreme Court looks like it's going to get rid of the regulation that Cruz and the Republican Party have gone before it to argue is undemocratic. And what it is that actually a winner of an election can then solicit money from people, powerful people or people who want things done, above and beyond $250 million, which is what that is right. Yeah. And it's not like the guy who lost the election is going to be able to solicit money, because who wants to give that person money? You only give a person money who's won because you're trying to buy favor, buy something. Yeah. And to see that the Supreme Court is saying, yeah, I think we agree with you. You should be able to get bought after you're elected. We're fucked.
Well, we've been here before, though. I mean, and it's kind of in the 19th century, and the election, it's like buying and selling, and the corruption of it was simply appalling in the 19th century, and it's the kind of thing that I actually see that the Republicans are going to try and do other things as well. And
what are they licking their chops to dismantle or do?
Oh, well, it's the latest thing this morning is election police. Did you hear about that?
Oh God, no.
Florida and Georgia.
Exactly.
They are looking at bills that would create a state level election police.
Oh, in Florida, yeah, I have seen that.
And in Georgia,
election police. Yeah. Can you imagine? Yeah. This is their latest. Yeah, okay.
Run and organized by the state governing party.
Who in their right mind can think that is a good idea? I mean, what scares me is how brazen they are. They're not. Yeah. They're flat out saying what they're doing, what they intend to do. Yeah. They're doing it with an extraordinary transparency, and they're getting away with it. Why?
I think yes.
Because the Democrats are woefully unable to, I don't know, counter.
I actually think it's not so much that. I think that it's because the Republicans are so woefully deficient in having of what they're actually selling to voters. Because there's kind of in my view anyway, a connection here between that. It's almost like that all that Republicans are about are culture wars. And so that any policy difference, any political difference that you might have with Joe Biden or the Democrats, you win when you can convert that into a cultural kind of tripwire or a cultural battlefield. That you win when you can do that.
Yeah.
Because they have nothing else.
That's right. It was like Biden said at his press conference yesterday. What do they stand for? What are they? What? Yes. Show me some.
And they have no answer to that.
None. No, they have none.
More culture wars.
Power. Yeah, because that's how they get power.
Exactly. But you see, there's a degree to which this is an indicator of profound bankruptcy. And it's like because it's all they've got. It's like, and so it's like it looks bad, and I'm certainly not trying to mitigate the peril here, but it is in my view more of an indicator of their weakness than the Democrats' weakness. The Democrats have weaknesses, clearly, But it is, if it's like, I would much rather be in the Democrats' position than the Republicans' position.
Well, the Republicans are fighting like people whose back is against the wall and are cornered.
Exactly.
I mean, that is right. But they'll take the House down with them.
I suspect they will. I suspect they will. I look ahead to this year, and I kind of think that there's probably two things that could alter the equation. I'm not even saying that they probably, I'm just saying that they could.
Okay.
And the first is that, and I think the more likely one to make some change is the overthrow of Roe v. Wade. I think that is a done deal. Yes. That is happening this year, and I think this is a fairly politically sophisticated Supreme Court, and so I wouldn't be surprised if they try to fudge the clarity of their decision.
Well, don't you think they can? I mean, to overdo Roe, all they have to do is just throw it back to a state.
The states.
Right. Yeah.
But they can introduce all certain wrinkles in there to make it look like that they're charting some lesser point on the landscape.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. And pretty it up as much as they can. Right.
Yeah, and so to me that I think that is such politically unknown real estate right now. We've been living in decades.
Wait, Jared, excuse me. You're suggesting that if the court does this, finally has this huge win in the culture wars, which the Republicans always feel they're losing,
right?
That they think this will be great, but you're suggesting, are you not, that it could backfire on them?
I actually think they've known all along it isn't going to be great. I think they have known all along that on the one hand, you do have a lot of people in the House and Senate and the state who desperately want this. I don't want to suggest otherwise. But what I'm saying is that a number of Republican political operators, they have a lot of concern about this. The people who talk about who coach people on campaigns and things like that, they have a lot of concerns about this because they know the numbers don't work for them. What is it, 65% of Americans? The last number that support the basics of Roe v. Wade. And so it's like, okay, how's that going to work? It's also the case that one of the key parts of that legal case involves the Texas legislation with its kind of mercenary, indirect form of outlawing abortion. If they sign off on that, that is going to make for a very interesting battle in terms of civil rights involving women's rights. Because
are you suggesting that they will uphold Texas's law?
Yes. Yep, I do.
Kidding.
No.
Wow.
No, I don't.
I mean, they certainly refuse to stop it at this point.
Correct.
But
and it's yeah. I should say I do have I don't have certainty about that or anything like that. No, if you would ask me, I think they will. They will or uphold major provisions of it. Here again, because if you are leaving it to the states, then you leave that alone.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
right.
The state did that. Then hey, let them do it. And
why do Jared? I'm getting deja vu here because it's like that's states' rights. They're going to take us right back to the arguments for slavery.
Yes, and secession and all the rest of it. But I actually think that it's they've got so many other things that are going to come that reflect this. And this is just one of them.
Okay, so you said there were two things that could maybe change the calculation. So there's that, and what was the second?
Yes. The second, and I have less confidence about this one, is the issue of all the different investigations that are chasing after the Trump organization and the Trump family, and the coup from last January. That I think that it could lead to something. I've been sorely tested by what's been passing for our justice system when it comes to this set of subjects. But hey, people who seem to know something about justice say there's stuff coming, and I'll believe it when I see it.
It does seem that way now. I mean, we're starting finally to be getting little dribbles of a sense that stuff's coming down. Which would be good. Well, here let's look. There's so much to talk about.
Well, there's one other piece I wanted to say about that. Other piece I wanted to say about that, and that is, it's like if Trump is taken out of the current political landscape, I don't know what this Republican Party looks like, because there's nobody out there that can take his place. And what you'll have is wannabes. But I think the problem is that most of those people have long political careers to them. People like Ted Cruz and there's a whole raft of them out there. Mel Brooks and all folks like that. And if you actually get with Republican voters, they don't trust those people very much. They trust Donald Trump, but they don't trust these other people.
Well, what the Republicans probably want is to be able to, somehow get rid of Trump, but hold his base and put in front a cleaned up of somebody who's not, disgusting like Trump is, and a crook. No, not a crook. Somebody who actually you could take home to meet your parents, who looks presentable, who is presentable. Somebody like, let's say, Glenn Youngkin in Virginia.
Yeah, somebody who won't be so obscene and who can hold themselves together for an hour or two.
That's right, and will still keep get them what they want. Without the sideshow. But is that possible? Because it seems to me the Republican Party is literally being run by this enraged, delusional base.
Yeah.
And who's in charge of that?
Yeah. I think that's true. Well, I think that is what that's here again. If Trump isn't on the landscape, I don't know what those people do. And my guess, now here again, this is like way optimistic, but there's history that actually backs it up. In the sense that those kind of hard right or hard left folks, when there reaches a point where they just shut up and go away. And that without their guy at the center of what they're about, I wouldn't. I think it's possible.
I'm going to take you back though to the fact that there's a lot of people making a lot of money off this horror show, and so let's take
people who have far less credibility than Donald Trump. Within the Republican Party.
Well, I'm even thinking I'm going back to Fox News, Tucker Carlson.
Yes. Yeah, but those folks they're what is they're Trump wannabes, and yet I could be missing something. I could be wrong. But I simply don't think that the ardent Trump base out there really has much use for those people, as in terms of being a replacement for Trump.
At the heart of all of this insanity,
yes,
is race.
Yes,
unbelievable. Race was the sin at our beginnings, at our origins. It's why our foundational documents are so, in a way, bizarre, even though we've been told to revere them. And it has brought us to this.
Right.
We've never reckoned with it. Never reckoned.
We've had passing flirtations with it.
Yeah.
And
really?
here's the thing, and it actually is, again, one of the things that has me cause for hope, and that is whenever you talk to young people. Okay, you you are young at heart. I am young at heart. That you strike me as somebody who has conversations with young people occasionally. And it's like,
son. Yeah.
And it's just like it's a different world for people under 30. And I often, one of the funnier sort of elements of the history of this that the Democrats, one of the smartest things they ever did back in the 70s and the late 60s was to create public television. And create programs like Sesame Street and the Teletubbies and Mr. Rogers and what's the one with the dragon, the purple dragon? I can't even remember his name.
I don't know the purple dragon.
The one where you are where that is inclusive, diverse, and celebrates this, and it is so subversive. And the Republicans for 40 years missed it. Okay? For 40 years, they missed how subversive all of that television was, because virtually every family in America raised their kids on those programs. And so here we are now in the 21st century, and it's like you talk to young people, and it's like that sensitivity. And now I'm not saying that somehow racism has gone away, not at all. But what I'm saying is that I have hope. I have hope that generation, next generations of Americans who come along, that I'm not sure where the Republicans are going to go with those people.
Well, that's why they're doing what they're doing. They look to the future like you are, and they say,
right,
we're fucked. We're fucked. So we got to hold on no matter how we got to hold on. And if we have to have, our brown shirts and the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, and we've got to do this and that, we'll do it. It's what's
I think you're right. And again, one has to, how they're going to do that without a Donald Trump on the stage. And I don't see it.
Wow. Okay.
And you mentioned earlier how we have a history in this country that occasionally political parties go out of existence. Okay. And so, like, the Federalist Party, they were opposite Thomas Jefferson's party, the Democratic Republicans. It's like they collapsed after the War of 1812 because they played the politics wrong on the War of 1812. Then in the 1850s, you had the collapse of both the Whig Party and the old antebellum Democratic Party. Both of those parties collapsed, and new parties emerged. And then, it's like, depending on with the New Deal, you had kind of a new Democratic Party emerge, even though it still had the same name. And you kind of see the beginnings of the end of the old Republican Party that had existed since the Civil War. With Reagan comes along, you have a new Republican Party that is reinvigorated. I actually feel like that the Democrats are still living inside the same New Deal party that FDR created.
And somehow
we need to do better.
Okay. It just occurred to me that the Republican Party was an infant party when Abraham Lincoln, took on the Civil War. So the Republican Party in its infancy was there at that end of the Civil War, and cut to the present, where we're heading into another Civil War, and that Republican Party, now sclerotic and nationalist and racist, is going to bring us another Civil War, but it's on the other side. They moved themselves all the way over. That they would ever be thought of as the party of Lincoln now is a joke.
I think that they can't even talk about it. They have no foundation for even talking about it, and so they don't. Yep, that whole thing.
What do you think? How awful are these human beings? How awful is when the rogues gallery, there's not even enough wall space if you were to hang little teeny weeny little pictures all over a huge wall. There are so many despicable human beings.
I know.
Why in this entire Republican Party is there not one? I'm thinking like of, everybody speaks nicely of Mitt Romney, like he's some honorable guy. Why couldn't Mitt Romney, for instance, have stepped in for Joe Manchin? Why couldn't some other, it's like the Republicans are totally given a pass. And every single one of them. There's not a courage amongst them, except, I suppose, Liz Cheney and Kinzinger, and all of those guys are about to be destroyed.
Yes. Well, to me, it's the product of the political machinery, in the sense that the system of rewards that now exists in the Republican Party. It transcends primaries in the sense of where are you going to get your donor money? That it's now a system that rewards cravenness and cowardice and toadying. That's what they want.
We have a caller.
Oh, really? Okay.
No, not a caller. No, I'm sorry. He gave up and he took to the email. He wants to know, can Republicans return to relative normalcy if guys like, let's say, Maryland Governor Larry Hogan or ex-Ohio Governor John Kasich were to come to the fore? And how the hell can they come to the fore in this party?
I'm skeptical in the current political environment. It would take. Again, if Trump isn't on the stage, something else might be possible. But I don't see Hogan or people like that as being the immediate turn-to solution.
What they've got to do, Hogan and Kasich, is come to terms with the reality of what has happened to their party and either try to form a third one, another one, or come over to the Democrats.
Exactly. It's like it is, and I would say in their honest moments, a sizable number of Republican lawmakers would confess that is the harsh reality, and that they can't bring themselves to do either of those things.
Okay, here's one thing that seems obviously clear to me. And it's the failure of the Democratic Party. This is the biggest failure, if you ask me. And they still don't seem to have a clue. The Republicans always play a long game. for heaven's sakes, the anti-abortion folks have played the longest game. They're never deterred. They're dogged as hell. They get creative. They just keep on coming. And they end up eventually getting what they want. The Republicans also thought, well, we're having trouble with these national elections, but let's build up our strength from the bottom up. And so they control all of these state legislatures, and they get to draw the district lines. They get to gerrymander the hell out of things, rigging the election. And that's what they've done. And we never played the game.
Well, that's not entirely true.
Well, please correct me.
There's some redistricting stories in the Democratic Party that kind of echo a little bit of what the Republicans, but it's not in the same league. I will say that. I think that what you have is I'm not even sure. I don't want to repeat myself, but in terms of a party that is desperate, that had a choice of either embracing the new constituencies that are coming along, or trying to fix the system to exclude those constituencies.
Right, which is what they've done.
Crystal clear they've chosen the latter.
That's right. That's their choice. And if they have to turn into a bunch of goose-stepping fascists, they'll do it to do it. Obviously, that's what we're seeing. So listen, what happens when this despicable party regains control of the House? Maybe the Senate. I doubt.
I think it's the dysfunctionality is gonna spike, and it's gonna. But what you'll see, in my opinion, is a number of almost pieces of performance art when it comes to the kind of legislation and the kind of work that that they do. It's going to be shockingly lacking in things that make any difference for average Americans.
Well, of course not.
They could end up. But it'll be high in kind of performance content.
They'll do their investigations. They've already said they're probably going to they're going to try to impeach Joe Biden. Absolutely, I would expect, and if they do it, and it goes to the Senate and dies, they'll do it again, simply so that their constituents can say, well, Donald Trump was impeached twice, now Joe Biden's been impeached twice. That's right. So it's all it's performance art, because Biden has done nothing impeachable. Nothing.
Yeah. They'll impeach him for whatever his son, Hunter Biden, whatever he did. They'll impeach him for that.
God in heaven. Here's another thing that worries me. The gullibility, the seeming stupidity, or the just lack of interest of so many Americans in what's happening.
Well, that is certainly a point of there's many points of concern that I have in that area. It's like, how do you inform people whose basic approach to media is one that leaves them misinformed? How do you do that? I think here now there's ways to do this, but right now you have so many bad actors in that area. And here I'm not just talking about the Trump or the Republicans or those people. I'm talking about the folks like the Chinese and the Russians and others. Right. They're deeply invested in just oceans of misinformation headed our way.
And it's worked, and it is working. So they're taking us down from within with misinformation. I mean, the fact that the Russians got Donald Trump helped get Donald Trump into the White House is, to me, as much of a terrorist attack on the country as 9/11 was. It's as much of a victory for an enemy, maybe more so.
I agree. And now we actually, in reference to Russia, I actually think that we're right now in the next We're right now, like we're facing a something of a serious what's the word point here, because Russia is looking at you invading the Ukraine.
And you know what, Jared? We're being brought back to the 30s, 1930s. Yes. It is unbelievable. Yeah. We got the brown shirts in the streets, the thugs, the intimidation of whole groups of human beings. We've got Russia,
a political system that is so polarized that it's like if let us just run the hypothetical. If Russia should invade the Ukraine, let's say they do that. And what is Biden said in his presser that they got a number of things with their European allies lined up to do, but then he backtracked and basically said that if they only took a little piece of Ukraine, that might be okay.
Yeah,
and that was just like, no, Joe, that was not the thing to say. Okay, you just gave away your position, because that's like again, the historical connection here. That's like telling Hitler he can take the Sudetenland. He can take the Sudetenland, but he has to leave the rest of the people. Yeah, it's like okay, and it's like okay. So, but the say they invade. Okay, what is going to be the domestic response here? It's like I would fully anticipate that Trump and hardcore Republicans will be on Putin's side.
Yes.
They will cheer Vladimir Putin simply because it'll make Biden look bad. Not realize there's no connection to our long-term national interests, the destruction it would mean to our alliances, all the rest of it. It's going to put, it reminds me of the situation that Obama faced back. What was I can't even remember now, the conflict that he was facing, where his immediate reaction was, okay, we're going to do something about this foreign policy issue, and realized within 48 hours that there was not one Republican that was willing to stand with him, that they're all preparing to attack him.
Yeah, because what are they out? They need the Democratic president, no matter who, to fail.
Yes,
they need the Democratic president to fail. So that need is greater than the needs of the country. They're just
from their point of view. Again, you talk yourself into a certain corner with the Republicans, because many of them will tell you that the country's already lost. And that what they're doing is doing kind of like a last-ditch kind of Hail Mary pass to save the country. And when you talk to
what is why are we lost?
From communism, from corrupt folks who don't allow Trump to win the election.
So what you're saying is it's just more bullshit, and it's just bullshit and lies.
Well, it's that's where they're coming from. It's like you can justify all kinds of things. Again, on the historical level, this reminds me of the deal that conservatives in Germany made with the fascists back in around 1930 to 34, right in that window of time. I mean, from all of the 1920s, when the Nazi Party was emerging, the conservatives had no use for Adolf Hitler. I know a handful that tossed him money, but otherwise they just had no use for him at all. But what happened is that you had the Great Depression come along, and then you had a tremendous, one of the impacts of the Great Depression was to drive millions of Germans into the Communist Party. And then, by casting the socialists and the communists as these just horrible alternatives, these folks that would be a complete disaster for Germany, that had the effect of moving even those conservatives who hated Adolf Hitler into cutting deals with him, and eventually buying into the kind of Nazi ascent to power. And I have a concern about that kind of going forward here, that conservatives, even those who despise the kind of white supremacist, hyper-nationalist, Trumpian approach to politics, the conservatives will make their bed with him anyway. And simply because they've been so worked up into fear about leftist woke culture in America.
Okay, two questions. One, as a historian, can you imagine? Go back to anything, Nazi Germany, whatever, and imagine that the internet existed.
What's the question?
Well, the question is, how much easier would it have been for Hitler?
Well, that's hard to say. It is the kind of thing that that's hard to say. I would say that people in the 20s and 30s, it may actually have been much easier to influence people than it is now. I think one of the things you kind of have going on right now that there's certain, I would say, folks, organizations, influencers on the right that are way more ahead of the game on using the internet than Democrats and the people on the left. It is striking how many Republicans, that they get their news from literally like dozens and dozens of different news sources, all of them equally rancid.
Yeah.
And yet on the Democratic side, yes, you have Daily Kos. But it's like they don't get nearly the action.
No.
That like InfoWars and Breitbart and those others, they don't get nearly the attention that those other folks do.
Well, here's the other thing.
Yeah. What was the other question? You had another question.
Here's another thing. Right. If the culture wars are what the Republicans have in their quiver, and the only thing they have in their quiver, and going after these, the woke Democrats, does it make any sense for the Democrats to pull, what do we do with this big tent party with the left? And then I personally have thrown Mansion and Cinema out. They don't even exist as far as I'm concerned. They're, persona non grata. However, so what do we do? Do we move? This is the argument the Democrats get into. We've got to stop scaring the shit out of these people. We got to pull back. But what do you think? Is that a stupid reaction? Or
no, I actually think that that we've got to move to the. Well, I don't want to say. What we need to do is sell what we're doing to the center. And right now, I think that I actually don't think either party is selling to the center very well. And yet, when I go out in the world, people say that there is no center anymore. I don't believe that. I go out in the world, and most of the people I meet are still in the center.
Center because media likes drama, and you don't get drama in the center.
This is true.
So the only voices that are ever amplified are on both ends, never the center. No one hears them. That's why people think they're not there.
I would say another thing that certainly the Democrats need to do, and that is something you suggested earlier, is being more grounded in local and state level positions. Because Youngkins, when he won in Virginia, one of the stories that came out was the biggest hot button issue was school closures.
That's right.
And it's like the Democrats weren't talking about this at all. Indeed, to the extent that they were kind of unconsciously giving Youngkin his talking points.
Exactly.
They had no idea how upset parents were about school closures. And so that to me is another area where they should do some work, and I hope they will.
Okay, we're down to about 4 minutes left, Jared. I'm going to ask you to go somewhere terrifying. I'm going to ask you, in your darkest moments, when you're trying, I know you're a historian, you look back, but what is actually would have been unimaginable 20 years ago, which in your darker moments is totally imaginable now about how the United States will look, its governance, its people in, let's say, 10, 15 years?
Worst case scenario I could see would be a watered down, that we have basically a Democratic Party like we have right now, and an openly watered down fascist party on the right.
Well,
one that
now.
I don't think so. No, but one that actually governs, that one that proceeds forward with kind of dismantling our Constitution. Now, I actually don't think that we're there yet. I actually think that the courts and other things are still very much in our corner. But if you put enough Republican judges who are like openly fascist or some kind of in this new kind of vein of white supremacist nationalist, that will more than suffice for creating an entirely different kind of situation. So that is the kind of biggest fear that I have. I have no idea what that will look like in terms of average Americans living their lives.
Do you think there will be, continued? Well, I don't know. What does a civil war look like when we don't have two armies facing each other? Is it going to be like Ireland?
It's going to be all on the state level. It's going to be urban versus small town and rural. And I say that in the sense that that's where the fault lines are going to be. It's not going to be sectional the way it was in the Civil War.
No.
It's like almost every state is divided that way. Now, one other thing I wanted to mention, Lynn, before I know we're running out of time, is that one of the things I've been doing for many years at Pittsburgh, at the University of Pittsburgh, is doing programs for the Academy for Lifelong Learning. The lectures series, and I actually with Zoom. Actually, it turns out COVID was one of the best things that ever happened to me. That I actually began doing lecture programs at Pitt again, even though it's by way of Zoom. And I do those programs, and I also started on my own series of lectures. I'm doing one on the history of the Walt Disney Company coming up, as well as a history of kind of global European empires from like 1492 to 1700. And I wanted to just say, if anybody has an interest in those programs, I would invite them to shoot me an email. Can I give my email?
You betcha. Sure.
Yep. Jared.n, as in Nicholas, .day@gmail.com. And I'll be happy to right now I'm in the process of building a website, but it's not up there yet. So I wanted to just let people know if they have an interest in hearing about interesting historical topics like that. I mean, in the coming year, I'm going to be doing U.S. history, European history, and history of Hollywood. So those are all things I'm doing.
Way to use media to get your good. So your email is Jared JARED .n as in Nazis.
There we go. They remember that.
Nazis .day DAY @gmail.com.
That's right.
So feel free. And people miss, I got an email from somebody saying yesterday they missed Daily News Nuggets. That to be too much?
Yes. It was too emotionally taxing. Yeah, it was just to constantly have to try and take to the barricades. You must find this to be true, too.
Well, that's why I was so glad you were coming on today. I mean, I am feeling, there are times when I am feeling so bruised and battered and incapable of, I can't watch the news anymore. I can't, I know.
Yep.
We're all, and we haven't even mentioned that we're all living under this, this pandemic. Oh, God. So. Well,
yeah, I know we're running over here a little bit. I just wanted to say that I actually think that all of that taken together, I think the Biden presidency has done remarkably well.
I'm laughing because that's certainly not the media's spin.
No, you can't get credit for anything. And it doesn't matter if you're a Republican president or a Democratic president. You can't get credit for anything.
Oh, I think the standards they hold Biden to as opposed to Trump are ridiculous. I mean, it's just...
They certainly are not the same.
There were no standards for Donald Trump. None.
They certainly turned out to be a kind of a free-for-all.
Oh, dear God. Well, the old Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. Well, we sure as hell do. And I'd love to live in boring times. We tried to get there by electing a boring president, but it's not working.
Well, there's more work to do.
All right, Jared. Hey, thanks so much. It was great to hear you again and to get your perspective.
Thank you, Lynn. Always happy to.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye. Oh, dear. All right. Okay, you guys, that's it for me. I'm out of here. I'm going to go back into the fetal position I was before the show and keep my head down. Stay warm. Keep your eyes open. Keep your hearts open. Your heads down. I don't know if I agree with anything I just said. Anyway, bye-bye.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.